Welcome back to another video. I am Scott with Techno Eclipse, and in today's video I want to talk about using the iPhone SE in 2018. The iPhone SE released after the iPhone 6s, so this phone is relatively old at this point by phone standards, I guess. It came out in the beginning of 2016, obviously a similar time as when the 6s came out, the beginning of 2015, and there were obviously a lot of features they had to cut out. This was an homage to the iPhone 5s, which was one of Apple's best phones, one of the last phones Steve Jobs had anything to do with. When you look back at it, he wanted that smaller screen size and da-da-da-da-da, and then obviously they've gone bigger and bigger and bigger, all the way up to 6.5 inches in their most recent phone. So using the iPhone SE in 2018, can you do it? Absolutely. It is a great phone still. Even by today's standards, well, by my standards, I'd say. It depends on what you need in a phone. For somebody like myself who just needs an iOS device, essentially, it works well with my AirPods, it connects with my Apple Watch, it works with my MacBook, and it also works with my iPad as well. So my whole ecosystem is still working even though I don't have one of the newest and greatest phones. I do have an iPhone 8 Plus that I switched from. So let's go over some of the most important things and I'll just list them off here. We're going to talk about the camera, the screen, the actual day-to-day performance, the usability, and finally just my final thoughts. Should you buy one and what is a good price? So let's start with the camera. On the back, it has the same camera as the iPhone 6s, although this one does not feature a camera bump, which is kind of nice. Obviously, it still has the same exact design as the iPhone 5s, which did not have a camera bump. The back camera is still quite good. I had no problems taking pictures on it. I also had no problems taking videos on it. It does take slow-mo. It does take pretty good videos, pretty good pictures. Again, it's an older phone. The camera is not quite as good as the newer ones, but the step from even 2016 to now isn't that massive. So you're not losing out on all these great features. Like, yeah, you lose out on having that little bokeh effect, but you can still manufacture that exact effect by putting objects close. I'll show a picture on the screen now, where you can actually get a blurred background effect with this phone, with that camera, and it actually is kind of nice. But there is more than just the one camera on the back, and obviously there's a front-facing camera. The front-facing camera is absolutely god-awful. It's so bad. It's like a 1.2 megapixel camera. It's so bad. It's very, very hard to look at pictures. They look bad, they make you look ugly, and making me look ugly is very hard to do, so I was super surprised by that. But absolutely, that front camera is atrocious. If you are somebody who loves taking selfies, who needs to see their face all the time, who loves having a camera pointing at their face so they can see the screen and da-da-da-da-da, this probably isn't the phone for you. If you're just somebody who takes the basic Snapchat selfies and sends them to like your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, absolutely you're welcome to use this. It works fine. They just don't look very good. I'll show some examples between my 8 Plus and the iPhone SE, same lighting, same conditions, and you'll see on the screen now actually how bad it is. It's too bad they couldn't put a better camera in there, but again, this is a budget phone with a very powerful CPU. At the time, the most powerful CPU Apple had ever put in a phone. Next, let's talk about the screen size and the elephant in the room, the actual overall size of the phone. Clearly, it's not a very big phone. It is a fairly small phone, actually. 3.5 inches diagonal. And honestly, holding in your hands, one-handed use is amazing. Actually, it's something that I really appreciate with my iPhone 8 Plus. I have a case on it where when I hold it on my pinky for too long, there's actually like this indent on my pinky, and that's just one-handed use for like a few seconds. So I really appreciate the fact that this is small. You can hold it in your hand. I mean, you can squeeze my whole hand around it. You can definitely use it one-handed use, no problem. It's great. It still works really well with iOS, but the screen resolution is awfully low. Watching YouTube videos and watching content in general isn't the best experience, but I'll get into why that's a good thing later on in the video. But the speaker on the bottom isn't great. It's there, but it isn't great. The overall experience using that screen and using the size, I would say, is a good thing. And mainly the reason I think it's a good thing is because it sort of kept me off my phone a little bit. I didn't have such a big screen to watch all these videos and spend all this time doing all these extra things on it. So it actually limited my use of the phone, which is weird to say. I'm glad the phone limited my use of the phone. It's not because it's so bad, but it's all mainly because the screen is just not that pleasurable to use when you're consuming content. And I thought that was really nice, actually, getting a break from my phone. I really enjoyed that. I'm going to try to use my iPhone 8 Plus when I go back to it a lot less, now that I've experienced what it's like to not always be on your phone. I feel like I can get a lot more done. So let's talk about day-to-day use. In my job, it doesn't really require me to have my phone on me at all times. I do need it when I'm driving around sometimes to get from location to location, but day-to-day use was fine. Battery life was fine. At the end of the day, I always had enough battery. Sometimes it would be dying near the end of the day, but you just plug it in. 1 day worth of battery for me is good. I plug it in at night no matter what. My alarms would always go off. There was no problems there. iOS 12 works really well on it, much better than iOS 11. I've noticed there are a few less bugs, but again, it's an Apple device, so there might always be a little bit of bugs, but you know the software support and the changes will always be coming next. So as somebody who just uses his phones for the basics, YouTube, checking email, texting people, and calling people, that's pretty much all I use my phone for. I do like to take pictures sometimes, but I have a very nice camera now that I won't be needing to use a phone camera for very much longer because I'll be using this more and more. And really the only thing I take pictures of is like my dog or my girlfriend. So I don't really take a lot of pictures. Sometimes I'll take videos, and the camera when taking a video, it's shaky. It doesn't have optical image stabilization. It's just built right in there. So you don't get that super smooth video that, well, super smooth relative to what a phone should be able to do that my iPhone 8 Plus can actually manufacture. So keep that in mind. This is a budget phone. I mean, these cost under $100 consistently. So keep that in mind. But I really like how, again, it sort of kept me off my phone. I could do what I needed to do. iMessage still worked the exact same. I could still send the screen messages. I could still send Bitmojis. I could still send all that stuff. All the same apps work. It's just on a smaller form factor. So what are the two biggest positives and negatives I could take away from this? Well, I think the two biggest positives are, one, you get an iOS device that's still relatively powerful and will be supported for the next 2 years probably. If we've seen anything with the 5S, it should be supported for the next 2 years, I'd imagine. So you still get an iOS device for under $100 that is going to be getting support for the next 2 years, which is really, really good. I'm really happy about that. And I would say the next best thing is just how small it is. I would say that's a really big plus to some people who just live on their phones. Maybe it'd be good to get a smaller phone like this one where you're not always on it, where, you know, it's a little bit easier to use. You can get what you need to do done, but you're not going to be sitting there just staring at a screen that's that small. It's a little bit small to just be watching content, but again, I said that's nice for somebody like myself who has a computer, who has an iPad, who has a TV. I don't need to be watching content on a screen the size of a deck of cards. So I'd say the size and certainly the fact that it's running iOS are the two biggest benefits. The two biggest negatives are going to be the fact that it's so small. Obviously that was a positive, but it's also a pretty big negative if you're in the market for a media consumption device and you want it to be iOS and under $100. I would say try to find like a 6 or a 6 Plus. But again, this has a more powerful CPU, probably a little bit worse camera, well, especially a worse front-facing camera, but the back camera is actually going to be a little bit better. So you need to weigh your pros and cons there. But for under $100, you get this small form factor device that runs iOS. But if you want it to consume content, it's not going to be the phone for you. And I would say the next biggest negative of this phone is the front-facing camera. I don't take very many selfies at all, but the two that I did take on this phone looked horrendous. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, like, why does it look like that? Obviously, it's a budget phone. They have to make cutbacks here, cutbacks there, but what are you gonna do? Oh, and a tiny little side note, All of the accessories for the 5S, which also fit the SE, are super dirt cheap. So I bought like a Mophie power bank for like 20 bucks when it normally retailed. I think that retailed for either 100 or 199. So that's really cool. You get all these accessories that are old now for really dirt cheap and on a phone that's actually not that old. So at the end of the day, who is this phone for? Well, you need to decide what you want. If you want to test out iOS, this is a great phone to start with. It'll dip your toes in the water. You're not gonna have a huge $700, $800, $900 or even $1,000, $1,100 commitment. It's $100. If you can spare $100 or even less for getting a used one, you can definitely experience iOS and get all the great things that iOS has to offer. It's not the best experience on an iOS device ever. I would say my A Plus is way better of an experience. It's a much bigger screen. Typically, that's kind of how it works. Obviously, there's a threshold at some point where the screen just gets too big, but I would say the size of this screen is limiting in a good way and a bad way. So if you're looking for an iOS device that's cheap, this is a great phone to get. And if you want an iOS device that's cheap, that's going to be getting support for a while, again, this is a great device. It's got a great CPU. Even by today's standards, it has a great rear-facing camera for pictures and some video. While the front-facing camera isn't great, it's still very, very much usable, especially in 2018. I know it has a low screen resolution, but I can't notice the pixels at all. I've never been like, oh my gosh, I can't see anything. I can't see anything on this screen because the resolution's so low. I've never had that problem once. In my opinion, I'd say go for it if you're looking for a cheaper iOS device. It's a great device still, especially in 2018. It's cheap, and I think that's one of the best things. The fact that you can get an iOS device for as cheap as that will still be getting support for at least another 2 years. Let me know what you guys thought about this video in the comment section down below. Do you have an iOS device? Do you have an iPhone SE? Blah, 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 blah. I want to know. I want to know it all, your whole life story. And again, you're welcome for saving your marriage, because that's what we do on this channel. We talk about tech and we save marriages. So if your marriage is in the toilet right now, or your relationship, get that loved one an iPhone SE, and it'll change your life. All right, I'm just joking. If you liked the video, let me know in the comment section down below. If you didn't, tell me what I should change. And if you really, really like the video, smash that subscribe button. And I will see you in the next video. Live stream will not be this Sunday, but in fact, it will be the next Sunday after that. I'm switching to every other week at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thanks again for watching. This has been Scott with Techno Eclipse. Peace out.